Deceit that W-A-S and deceit asterisk. She didn't fall into a seat. She fell into a secret that ruled the night. One tired mistake on the subway turned a poor waitress into a hunted name. And when she tried to stand up, the man beneath her simply said, "Stay." The exhausted waitress had stopped feeling pain hours ago. After a double shift that turned into a third because someone forgot to show up, she walked like her bones were borrowed. Her uniform smelled of spilled coffee, fryer smoke, and cheap cleaner. The city didn't care that she was trembling from hunger. The city only cared that she kept moving. At 3 a.m., the subway was the last tunnel between her and a bed that didn't feel like safety, just a place to disappear for a few hours. The train arrived with a metal scream. Inside, the car looked half dead. A few slumped bodies, empty seats, flickering lights that made everyone's face look sick. She clutched the pole as the doors shut, swaying with emotion. Her phone screen showed her step count and her bank balance like a cruel joke. She promised herself one thing. If she could just sit down, she could survive the ride home. That was all. Just a seat. Just 5 minutes of rest. She saw a space near the middle doors. It looked empty. Her brain didn't check properly, because exhaustion makes you careless and quiet. She turned and dropped backward expecting hard plastic. Instead, she landed on something warm, firm, and very human. Her body locked. Her mind caught up a heartbeat later. This wasn't a seat. This was someone's lap. She tried to jump up, mortified, whispering apologies, but a hand closed around her waist with calm, crushing certainty. It wasn't a grope. It wasn't playful. It was an anger. The grip said, "You are not going anywhere." A low voice rumbled beneath her, not loud, yet it filled the space like a command in a courtroom. "Stay." One word. No anger, no laughter. Only control. She turned her head slowly, afraid of what she'd find: a drunk man, a creep, someone ready to embarrass her. But the face she saw didn't belong on a subway. He looked too precise, too still, like a statue brought to life. Pale skin, dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes so deep they seemed to swallow the flickering light. He didn't stare at her with desire. He studied her like a problem he had already solved. "You are exhausted," he said, as if he were reading a report. "If you stand now, you will collapse." She swallowed hard. "Let me go." His hand didn't move. "Your heart is racing. You haven't eaten properly. You are shaking." She blinked. "How do you know that?" His gaze dropped briefly to her name tag, then back to her face. "I observe." The train rocked through a curve, and the lights blinked out for a breath. In that darkness, his hold adjusted not tighter in cruelty, but steadier, like he was keeping her balanced. When the lights returned, 3 men stumbled into the car from the next section, loud with cheap laughter and ugly confidence. Their eyes landed on the waitress sitting on a stranger's lap, and their faces twisted with mockery. "What is this?" One sneered. "You two put on a show?" The waitress's stomach dropped. She tried again to rise, but the pale hand remained firm, not allowing her to put herself in danger. The man beneath her finally lifted his chin, looking toward the drunk men as if they were dust. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He spoke softly, and the entire car seemed to listen. "Leave." The word wasn't magic in sound, but it carried authority that hit the air like pressure. The drunk men froze. Their laughter died, replaced by a sudden, instinctive fear. One of them turned pale, swallowing hard like his body remembered something his mind couldn't explain. "We're going," he mumbled, backing away. They vanished into the next car as if chased by something unseen. The exhausted waitress sat rigid, breathing fast. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man's eyes returned to her, calm and unreadable. "Rest," he said, and his voice softened by a fraction, just enough to feel protective. Against her will, her eyelids grew heavy. The warmth of his coat, the steady stillness of him, the safety of being held upright, her body betrayed her. She leaned back slightly, and sleep pulled her under like a tide. When the announcement jolted her awake, she wasn't on his lap anymore. She was seated beside him, her head resting against his shoulder as if it belonged there. He sat perfectly composed, as though nothing unusual had happened. The doors opened at her stop. She scrambled up, embarrassed, terrified, and confused all at once. "Wait your name?" she asked, gripping her bag like a shield. He turned his face just enough for the light to catch his eyes. "Sebastian," he said. Then, after a pause that felt like a verdict, he added, "Go straight home. Lock your door." She stepped onto the platform and watched the train pull away. Through the dirty glass, he didn't wave. He simply watched her calm, certain, and impossibly patient, until the tunnel swallowed him and the night felt colder than before. The debt he erased asterisk, he didn't follow her home. He followed her suffering. The next time their paths crossed, it wasn't fate, it was design. Because when a vampire king decides to help you, your entire life shifts. The exhausted waitress tried to convince herself the subway encounter was nothing more than a strange late-night incident. Cities create odd moments all the time, she told herself. Rich men ride trains. Beautiful strangers exist. People imagine intensity when they're tired. Yet the memory refused to fade. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt that steady arm around her waist and heard that impossible stillness where a heartbeat should have been. She returned to work the next day as if nothing had happened, tying her apron, forcing polite smiles, and swallowing exhaustion like medicine. The diner was loud as usual, plates clattering, customers complaining, the manager barking orders without mercy. She moved quickly between tables, ignoring the ache in her knees. At one booth, a businessman snapped his fingers instead of calling her. At another, teenagers laughed when she stumbled slightly from fatigue. Humiliation was routine. Kindness was rare. Yet she kept serving everyone with quiet patience. Because survival demanded endurance, not pride. By noon, the manager cornered her near the kitchen door, voice low but cruel. "You broke a glass last night. That comes out of your pay." She tried to explain it slipped because she was covering 2 shifts, but he didn't care. "If you can't handle the job, quit." She lowered her head, whispering an apology she didn't owe. That was when she noticed something strange. He suddenly went silent mid-sentence, eyes drifting past her shoulder. His face changed, not with anger, but with fear. A man sat alone in the back booth. He wore a charcoal suit so precise it looked sculpted, not stitched. Pale hands rested calmly on the table. Dark eyes watched the room without moving. Her breath caught. The subway. It was him. Sebastian. He hadn't ordered yet, but a fresh cup of coffee already sat before him, placed there by the manager himself, hands slightly trembling. The waitress approached slowly, heart beating faster than it should. "You came here?" she asked quietly. "You work here," he replied simply. His gaze moved briefly to the way she gripped her tray too tightly. "You haven't rested enough." She placed the coffee pot down. "If this is about the subway," he slid a black envelope across the table. "Open it when you are alone." She stared at it, but didn't touch it. "I don't take money from strangers." "It is not charity," he said. "It is correction." Before she could argue, he stood. The movement was smooth, controlled, final. "Take tonight off," he added. "You need sleep." Then he walked out, and no one dared stop him. The envelope burned in her apron pocket all afternoon. She waited until her short break, locking herself in the restroom before opening it. Inside were legal documents stamped and signed. Her hands began to shake as she read. Every loan in her name, hospital bills, payday lenders, credit debt marked paid in full, balance, 0. A handwritten note rested on top in sharp, elegant script. Your burdens interfered with your survival. I removed them. SV. She stared at the page until the letters blurred. Years of stress. Gone. Not reduced, erased. Her first reaction wasn't relief. It was fear. When she returned to the floor, the manager rushed toward her, not angry this time, but nervous. There's been a change, he said. Your night shifts are canceled. Same pay. New owner's orders. She blinked. New owner? He swallowed. Building sold this morning. Vain Enterprises. The tray slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor, but no one yelled this time. Her entire world tilted. Debt gone. Hours reduced. Workplace bought. This wasn't kindness. It was control. That night, instead of going home, she went to the address printed on the document. The tower rose into the skyline like a black blade, swallowing sunset light. Inside, the air felt colder than outside. Security didn't question her. He's expecting you, the guard said. Already dialing the elevator, the doors opened directly into a vast penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked the sleeping city. Sebastian stood near the window, hands behind his back like a king surveying territory. You bought my life, she said immediately, anger covering fear. He turned slowly. No, he corrected. I bought your problems. She stepped closer, gripping the envelope. Why? His eyes studied her, not cold, calculating, patient. Because you show kindness even when humiliated. Because you endure without becoming cruel. That is rare. She shook her head. I can't repay this. I do not want repayment in money, he said. I want your time. He handed her a contract. Night assistant. Salary beyond anything she'd imagined. You will work beside me. Travel where required. Be present where humanity is needed. Her voice faltered. Why me? He stepped closer, presence overwhelming, but not threatening. Because when you sat on my lap, he said quietly, you did not smell like fear. You smelled like life. She looked down at the contract, then back at him, realizing refusal would return her to poverty, while acceptance would bind her to the unknown. Her hand trembled as she signed. The Gala of Shadows ***. She didn't know she was walking into a kingdom that, hunted by heartbeat. 3 nights after signing the contract, the exhausted waitress stood in a dressing room, larger than her entire apartment. The gown she wore was deep midnight blue, simple but elegant, nothing flashy. Yet it transformed her reflection into someone almost unrecognizable. She touched the fabric nervously, feeling like an imposter dressed in borrowed confidence. Sebastian stood near the doorway, already prepared in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He looked less like a businessman and more like something ancient pretending to be one. You look appropriate, he said calmly. Not beautiful, not stunning, appropriate. Yet something in his eyes softened for half a second, and she felt seen in a way she couldn't explain. The car ride to the gala was silent, except for the city lights sliding across the tinted windows. She tried to slow her breathing. This is just a charity event, right? She asked quietly. It is a gathering, Sebastian replied. Charity is one of its masks. That answer did nothing to calm her. The event was held in a historic museum closed to the public for the night. Crystal chandeliers glowed above polished marble floors. Music floated softly through the hall. Wealth and influence filled the air like perfume. But the moment they stepped inside, she felt something shift. The room wasn't loud, yet it buzzed with awareness. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Not toward her, but toward Sebastian. Respect, fear, deference. She walked beside him carefully, remembering his instruction. Lift your chin, do not show fear. The guests were beautiful in a way that didn't feel natural. Their skin looked flawless, movements too smooth, smiles slightly delayed. They held glasses filled with dark red liquid, but something about it felt heavier than wine. Her pulse quickened. A tall man with pale blonde hair approached, his smile sharp but polite. "Sebastian," he greeted smoothly. "I didn't expect you to bring company." His eyes shifted to her, scanning not her dress, but her throat, her wrists, the pulse beneath her skin. She instinctively stepped closer to Sebastian. The Vampire King's hand moved to the small of her back, steady and firm. Not possessive, protective. "This is my assistant," Sebastian said evenly. "She is under my protection." The blond man's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "How generous of you," he replied, voice laced with something hidden. "Humans are fragile investments." The waitress felt the insult, but before she could respond, Sebastian's tone changed, still quiet, but edged with warning. "Careful," he said. Just that one word. The air between them tightened like a drawn wire. The blond man inclined his head slightly and stepped away. Her heart hammered. "What was that?" She whispered. "Politics," Sebastian replied. "You are safe." But the way he scanned the room told her safety was temporary. As the evening continued, she noticed subtle things. Guests avoided standing too close to her. A few looked irritated by her presence. Others looked curious, almost hungry. She overheard fragments of conversation about bloodlines, council votes, and ancient rites. She felt like the only fully human heartbeat. In a room that did not need oxygen to survive, needing air. She excused herself and slipped out to a balcony overlooking the city. The night breeze cooled her skin. She gripped the railing, trying to steady herself. "You don't belong here," a voice said behind her. She turned quickly. A thin man stood in the shadows, eyes gleaming strangely under the light. "He should not parade you around," the stranger continued softly. "It creates desire." Fear prickled along her arms. "I'm not anyone important," she replied, stepping back toward the door. "That is where you are wrong," he said, moving closer with unnatural speed. "You're sent alone." He stopped abruptly. Sebastian appeared between them without a sound. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply looked at the stranger, and something passed between them, silent, dangerous understanding. "You forget your place," Sebastian said quietly. The thin man's confident smile faltered. He lowered his head and retreated without another word. The waitress looked up at Sebastian, shaken. "They're not just rich people, are they?" she asked. He met her gaze steadily. For the first time, he did not hide the truth. "No," he answered. "They are my kind." Her breath caught. "Vampires," she whispered. "Yes." The word hung in the cool night air. She expected him to move away, to hide it again, to soften the confession. He did none of that. He simply stood there, allowing her to see him clearly. "Why bring me here?" she asked. "Because hiding you would make you prey," he replied. "Standing beside me makes you untouchable." Inside the hall, music swelled again. Conversations resumed. But something had shifted. She realized this was not just a gale, it was a court. And she had been presented to it. As they returned inside, eyes followed her more carefully than before. Not mocking, not dismissing. Measuring. And the truth Sebastian revealed would turn her from protected to hunted. The drive back from the gala was heavier than the one that had taken her there. The exhausted waitress sat quietly in the back seat, staring out at the city lights sliding across the glass. Everything she had seen replayed in fragments. The unnatural beauty of the guests, the way they held their glasses, the way their eyes followed her pulse. Most of all, she remembered the words Sebastian had spoken without hesitation. Vampires. He had not denied it, softened it, or laughed it off. He had accepted it like a fact as ordinary as breathing. Inside the penthouse, the silence felt different now. Before, it had seemed luxurious. Now it felt fortified. Reinforced glass windows stretched from floor to ceiling, but she noticed steel shutters hidden along the frames. Security panels glowed softly near every entrance. The place wasn't just a home. It was a fortress designed to keep something out or keep something safe inside. She turned to face him near the panoramic window. "You told me they were your kind," she said, voice steady but tight. "So say it clearly now. What are you?" Sebastian didn't answer immediately. He poured 2 glasses of water, handing her one, though she hadn't asked. A strangely human gesture. "We are what your stories call vampires," he said at last. No theatrics. No apology. Just truth. Her throat went dry anyway. "And you brought me into a room full of them?" "Yes. Why?" He watched her carefully, as though measuring how much truth she could bear. "Because hiding you would create suspicion. Displaying you beside me creates protection." She frowned. Protection from what? His jaw tightened slightly. "From them wanting you." The words landed wrong. "Why would they want me?" she asked, confused rather than afraid. That was when Sebastian went still in a way she had never seen before, not predatory, but conflicted. He walked slowly toward the city view, hands behind his back, posture rigid, like he was preparing for war rather than conversation. "There are rare humans," he began carefully, born with a genetic anomaly. "We call them nulls." She blinked. "Nulls?" "Your blood carries a unique antigen," he continued. "When consumed by a vampire, it suppresses the curse temporarily." She stared at him, not understanding. "Suppresses how?" He turned then, eyes darker than usual, but not with hunger, with restraint. "For a short time, we regain what we lost. Warmth, emotion, a normal heartbeat, even sunlight tolerance." Silence filled the room like pressure dot. Her hand trembled slightly around the glass. "So, I'm a cure?" "A temporary one," he corrected softly. "But rare enough to start wars." She set the glass down slowly, processing. "That's why they were staring." "Yes, that's why that man on the balcony said my scent created desire." "Yes." Fear crept in then, not fear of him, but of the weight of what she represented. "How many nulls exist?" she asked. "Few," he replied. "Many are found early. Most do not live long once discovered." Her stomach dropped. "Because vampires drain them?" "Because power attracts violence," he said evenly. "And null blood is power." She took a step back, realization dawning. "You knew this when you met me on the subway." He didn't deny it. "I sensed it immediately. So everything you've done paying my debt, protecting me, bringing me here, was to keep you alive," he finished. She searched his face for deception, manipulation, ownership, but what she saw instead was exhaustion. Not physical, emotional. "Why?" she whispered again, softer now. His answer came slower this time. "Because unlike others, I have no desire to consume what makes me human." The words were quiet, but they carried something heavier than power control. She wrapped her arms around herself, pacing slowly across the room. "So what happens now?" He didn't hesitate. "A bounty has already been placed on you." Her breath caught. "A bounty?" "Yes. Rival factions would pay fortunes for null blood. Some for power, others to weaken me." He stepped closer, not invading her space, but anchoring the conversation. which means from this moment forward, you are under my direct protection." She looked up at him, fear mixing with strange reassurance. Protection. Or captivity? His gaze didn't waver. Protection, he said firmly. You are free to leave at any time. But outside these walls, you would not survive a week. The truth of it settled heavily between them. She moved toward the window, staring at the endless city below. So many lights. So many people. None of them knew what lived in the dark spaces between buildings. "You said no blood makes you feel human," she murmured. "What does it feel like?" He hesitated, then answered honestly. "Peace," he said. "And that is why I will never take it without your consent." She turned back slowly, seeing him differently. Now, not just as a king or a monster, but as someone fighting his own nature every second. And slowly, the monster the world feared began proving he feared becoming one again. Life inside the penthouse fortress settled into a strange, quiet rhythm. The exhausted waitress was no longer running between tables or apologizing for existing. Instead, she managed schedules, answered late-night calls, and observed a world that operated while humanity slept. The nights were long, but not cruel. Sebastian never treated her like property, never raised his voice, never invaded her space without reason. If anything, he seemed overly careful around her, as though one wrong move could shatter the fragile trust between them. Still, the knowledge of what she was, what her blood meant, sat heavily on her shoulders. She couldn't forget the way the vampires at the gala had looked at her, measured, calculated, valuable. It made her hyper-aware of every small injury, every heartbeat echoing too loudly in quiet rooms. Sebastian noticed it without being told. He began assigning additional security, rerouting travel plans, even altering entire meeting locations just to minimize exposure. It was protection, yes, but it was also vigilance born from fear. One evening, while preparing a simple meal in the kitchen, her hand slipped while slicing fruit. The knife grazed her finger, not deep, but enough to draw blood. She hissed softly and reached for a towel. Before she could wrap it, the air behind her changed. Sebastian stood in the doorway. He hadn't made a sound. He hadn't rushed. But his entire posture had gone rigid. His eyes were locked on the thin line of red forming on her skin. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick and dangerous. She froze, suddenly aware of the risk, standing only a few steps away. He inhaled once slow. Controlled. Then he exhaled and stepped forward carefully. Not like a predator closing distance, but like someone approaching a wounded bird. He took a cloth from the counter, running it under cold water before gently taking her hand. His touch was steady, cool, deliberate. He cleaned the cut, wrapped it, and secured the bandage with precise care. "You should be more cautious," he said quietly. She watched him, surprised. "You're not tempted?" The question left her mouth before she could stop it. He paused briefly while tying the bandage. "Temptation exists," he admitted. "Action is a choice." She studied his face. No hunger, no struggle, only discipline. "You could take it by force," she said softly. "No one could stop you." He finished the bandage before answering. "That is precisely why I never will." The words settled deeply between them. From that night forward, something subtle shifted. She stopped seeing him purely as a protector and began seeing the restraint behind the power. He could command fear with a whisper, yet he chose patience with her. He could dominate rooms filled with ancient predators, yet he listened when she spoke about fairness, dignity, and the way humans treated one another. She began challenging him to questioning how vampire politics affected innocent people, why certain corrupt businesses he owned weren't reformed. Instead of silencing her, he implemented changes quietly. Workers got better conditions. Exploitative contracts were dissolved. He never announced it, but she noticed. Respect replaced fear. Trust followed slowly after. One late night, they stood side by side near the glass wall overlooking the city. "You've been changing things," she said. He didn't deny it. "You said kindness matters," he replied simply. "I am testing the theory." She smiled faintly. "And?" He looked down at the city lights, thoughtful. "It is inefficient," he said first. Then, after a pause, "but effective." The admission warmed something in her chest. For centuries, he had ruled through power and intimidation. Yet now he adjusted policies because a human waitress believed dignity mattered. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was something deeper. Mutual influence. Emotional grounding. She steadied him. He shielded her. Before leaving that night, he handed her a small device. "Emergency contact beacon," he explained. "If threatened, activate it." "I will come." She looked at it, then back at him. "You always do anyway," she said. He didn't reply, but his silence confirmed it. As she walked back toward her quarters, she realized something profound. The world feared the vampire king because he could destroy armies. But what made him extraordinary was what he refused to destroy, especially our trust. And in the end, the exhausted waitress would decide the fate of a vampire king. The attack did not come from the shadows of the city streets, or from rogue hunters chasing bounty money. It came from the very power structure Sebastian had ruled for centuries, the Vampire Council itself. They did not storm his tower with chaos. They arrived with law, authority, and ancient entitlement. One night, the penthouse security systems locked simultaneously, not from intrusion, but from override. Sebastian stood near the window the moment the alarms dimmed, already knowing who had come. "You should remain inside your quarters," he told her calmly, but she stepped closer instead. "Running from truth won't stop it," she said. He didn't argue, though tension lined his posture like drawn steel. The council entered not as monsters, but as aristocrats dressed in dark formal wear. 5 ancient vampires stood in the center of the penthouse, their presence pressing against the air itself. The eldest spoke first, voice smooth but cold. "You harbor a null without council consent. That is a violation of sovereign feeding rights." The waitress felt the words more than understood them. To them, she wasn't a person, she was classified property. "She is under my protection," Sebastian replied evenly. "Protection does not supersede council law," another member added. "Her blood belongs to the collective." Rage flickered behind Sebastian's calm exterior, but he didn't raise his voice. "She belongs to herself." The room went still. The eldest counselor's eyes shifted to her, calculating. "Human," he addressed her directly, "you have no comprehension of your value. Your blood could restore entire factions. Wars could end. Empires could stabilize. Your sacrifice would be beneficial." She felt fear rise, but not paralysis. She stepped forward beside Sebastian, refusing to stand behind him like an object being negotiated. "You speak of sacrifice," she said quietly, "but not consent." The council murmured softly at her boldness. Humans did not usually speak in such rooms. One counselor smirked faintly. "You misunderstand your position." "No," she replied, voice steadier now. "You misunderstand mine." Sebastian glanced at her, not in warning, but in recognition of her courage. The eldest counselor lifted a hand. "We will resolve this through ancient right," he declared. "If the king insists on sole protection, he must prove claim superiority through combat trial." The words struck like thunder. She turned to Sebastian. "Combat?" He didn't look at her, eyes fixed on the council. "Trial by dominance," he confirmed. "If I win, the council relinquishes all claim over you permanently." "And if you lose?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The trial was held on the tower's private rooftop before dawn, where city lights dimmed and the horizon bled gray. The council formed a silent circle. Sebastian removed his jacket, posture calm but lethal. His opponent, an ancient warlord vampire, stepped forward, power radiating like heat. The fight was fast but controlled, more like a clash of forces than violence. Sebastian fought not with rage, but with precision, defending rather than destroying. Still, the warlord was ancient, relentless, pushing him toward the edge of exhaustion. Watching him risk his existence for her protection broke something open inside her. She realized then this wasn't ownership. This wasn't obligation. This was choice on his part. And she had one too. Before the final strike could land, she stepped forward into the circle. "Stop," she called out. The council gasped softly. Humans did not interrupt trials. She looked at the council first. "You want my blood because it restores your humanity. Yet you speak without humanity yourselves." Then she turned to Sebastian. "And you fight because you believe protecting me is your duty." She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "I will not be owned by the council," she said clearly. "And I will not be owned by you." Silence fell heavier than before. She took Sebastian's hand willingly. "But I will stand beside you, by choice, not protection." The declaration shifted the entire balance. Council law was ancient, but it respected voluntary sovereign bonds. The eldest counselor studied them, then lowered his head slightly. "Then she is no longer claimable resource," he announced. "She is royal consort under free will covenant." The trial ended without another blow. Sebastian looked at her, not victorious, not relieved, but deeply moved in a way centuries had not allowed him to feel. "You chose this world," he said quietly. "I chose you," she replied. The first light of dawn crept over the skyline, and for the first time, he didn't look away from it.